Hi there, boys and girls. Welcome to Storytime with Mr. Riddle. Today we're going to read the story Mr. Min Sports Day. It's by Roger Hargreaves. At school every year, we usually have a special sports day here at our school, and everybody gets to compete. But this sports day is not like our sports day. It's a little different. Have you ever been to Nonsense Land? In Nonsense Land, the grass is blue, and the trees are red, and all the cars have square wheels. Why, you ask? Easy, so they don't roll away when they're parked on a hill. I know. What nonsense. And in Nonsense Land, they hold a sports day every summer. Nothing silly about that, I hear you say. Well, you'll just have to wait and see. This year, the preparations for the sports day started 2 weeks before the event, and, it being Nonsense Land, things happened somewhat differently to how you would have expected. Little Miss Scatterbrain got the sports field ready. Look, she's vacuuming the field. Mr. Dizzy marked out the track for the races. Oh my goodness, that's a crazy track to follow. And Mr. Nonsense, he got the finishing line ready. A very silly looking finishing line. Look, it's a fishing pole with a shoe. The day of the Nonsense Land Sports Day dawned to a great deal of excitement. All the Mr. Men were there, and no one was more excited than Mr. Rush, who was at the sports day for the very first time. He couldn't wait for the last event of the day, the 100-meter sprint. But for the first time in his life, he did wait. There's Mr. Happy and Mr. Bump. There's Mr. Rush. I think that's Little Miss Chatterbox, I believe. There were lots of other events to watch. However, as each one came and went, Mr. Rush became more and more confused. The high jump had become the low jump and was won by Mr. Small. Mr. Small, he's the smallest. And the long jump became the short jump. It was won by Little Miss Tiny. Doesn't have a picture of Little Miss Tiny, sorry. But she's just as small as Mr. Small. Throwing the hammer became throwing the jelly. It was won by Mr. Strong, whose jelly went a bit farther than he intended it to. He threw the jelly all the way. Oh dear. Little Miss Naughty was leading all the way in the sack race, but Mr. Nosy won it by a nose. There's Little Miss Sunshine. We know her. Mr. Nosy. For the swimming gala, Mr. Silly had filled the swimming pool with custard. Mr. Tickle won by hand on the end of his extraordinary long arm. Mr. Tickle has really long arms to tickle with. There's Mr. Greedy. Look, Little Miss Twins. And the egg and spoon race became the raw egg and teaspoon race. It was much trickier and a lot messier. Finally, it was time for the 100-meter sprint. Mr. Rush and all the other runners took their places at the starting line. The starting pistol fired, and Mr. Rush shot down the track before you could say 6 speedy sausages. He had crossed the finish line. "I've won!" cried Mr. Rush. Because he's fast, and he's always in a rush. Everyone gathered round for the prize presentation. Mr. Rush could not wait to hear the announcement. The King of Nonsense Land stood up on the stage. In third place, he said, is Mr. Silly, for the silliest running shoes ever. He's wearing flippers for swimming. That's what he ran in. That's crazy. Remember, it's nonsense land. In second place, he continued, is Little Miss Dottie for the silliest running outfit. The silliest running outfit. And in first place, for by far the silliest 100-meter sprint, is Mr. Slow. But Mr. Slow, he didn't even run. Look, he hasn't even finished yet, cried Mr. Rush, who could not believe what he'd just heard. Exactly, said the king. He walked. What could be sillier than entering a running race and then not running? Here he comes now. There he is, still walking the race. Mr. Slow. Poor Mr. Rush hadn't realized that the event was called the silliest 100-meter sprint. But that's nonsense, said Mr. Rush. Exactly, said Mr. Slow. It's complete nonsense. And he stepped forward to collect his cup. A teacup. That was the prize. The end. What nonsense. Mr. Men, Sports Day by Roger Hargreaves. We've read several of these stories in class. They're a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed the story. We'll probably read a few more. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.